Hi, I'm Brenda, and today I received a letter from a subscriber that completely changed the way I see family secrets. I could barely breathe when I read her words. She discovered something that shattered everything she thought she knew about her own blood, and I need to share it with you now. If you're someone who believes your family is simple and straightforward, this story might shake that belief. It's proof that even the people we think we know best can hide entire lives from us. And sometimes, the truth comes out in the most unexpected ways. That's exactly what happened to her. She had always been close to her grandfather. He was quiet, wise, and kind, a true rock in her life. Growing up, she loved his stories about the past even, though he always left out the details that really mattered. She thought it was just his way, but everything changed the day she was cleaning out his attic after he passed. Among boxes of old books and clothes, she found something that didn't belong. It was a small wooden chest with a lock, and surprisingly, the key was taped underneath it. Her heart raced as she opened it. Inside were faded photographs, letters, and a journal with a leather cover. She wasn't prepared for what she would find written in those pages. Her grandfather had a whole second life, not another family, not another job, but something far more complex. He had been involved in something that could destroy everything her family believed about him. And now, she had to decide whether to keep it buried or expose the truth. She sat on the attic floor, the journal heavy in her hands, her fingers trembling as she turned the first page. It began innocently enough, talking about her grandfather's youth, his early jobs, his struggles, but soon the tone shifted. There were names she didn't recognize, places she'd never heard of, and then dates that didn't match the family timeline. He wrote about a woman named Celia, not her grandmother, not someone anyone in the family had ever mentioned. He spoke of her with tenderness, describing moonlit walks, secret meetings, and the pain of separation. She had never imagined her grandfather having a love story outside the one everyone knew. The journal told of two cities, one where he built his public life and another where he maintained a second identity. It sounded like fiction, but the entries were too detailed, too emotional to be made up. She kept reading, heart pounding, realizing she was looking into the soul of a man she thought she understood. Then she found a letter tucked between the pages. It was from Celia, dated 1984. "You promised to tell them the truth one day," it read, "but you never did. I won't wait forever." The handwriting was delicate, filled with longing. It was the kind of letter that leaves. She took the journal downstairs and sat by the fireplace, needing warmth to steady the chill in her bones. The flames flickered gently, but the words from the attic kept echoing in her mind. She turned another page, now reading an entry from 1986. "I saw her again today. Celia still smiles like nothing has changed." Her grandfather had never mentioned traveling that year. Photographs on the mantle stared back at her smiling faces. Birthdays, weddings, all of them built on a version of truth she was now questioning. How many of these moments had been lived with a lie resting quietly beneath? How many smiles masked a deeper story that no one dared to speak? She texted her mother, but quickly deleted the message. What could she say? "Hi, Mom. Did Grandpa have a secret lover?" No, this wasn't something she could ask without proof. She needed more. She returned to the journal, gripping it tighter, reading as if it were oxygen. There was another note, this one written by Celia's hand again. "The child should know. She has a right." The words were underlined. What child? Did her grandfather have another daughter? Was she reading the story of an entirely different branch of her own family tree? Suddenly, her identity felt fragile. What if she wasn't who she thought she was? What if her last name, her blood, was only half the truth? Her stomach twisted, but a deeper part of her wanted answers. Unable to sleep, I returned to the attic the next morning. Sunlight poured through the tiny window, casting long beams across the dusty floorboards. I searched the corner where the box had been, hoping to find something else. A smaller velvet pouch was tucked behind a rafter. Inside was a silver locket, tarnished with age but engraved with initials, J+C. My grandfather's name started with J, and Celia's, of course. It was their locket, a symbol of something I was never meant to know. My hands trembled as I held it, a forbidden relic from a hidden chapter. Tucked beneath the locket was a folded photo. In it, my grandfather stood arm in arm with a young woman who wasn't my grandmother. They looked happy, too happy for it to have been meaningless. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "Celia and James, 1968, our secret summer. This wasn't just an affair." It was a love story buried beneath decades of silence. My grandfather had a whole other life he kept locked away. And somehow, my family had lived in the same house, unaware of the echoes in the walls. What if Celia had been more than just a mistress? What if she had family too, children? Could I have cousins I'd never met? Could the woman from the journal, the child who should know, still be alive? I suddenly felt like a detective in my own bloodline. I decided I had to find her. Whoever this other branch of our family was, they deserved to be seen. And maybe I spent the next few days digging through old town records. In dusty archives and forgotten boxes, I searched for any trace of Celia or a child born around that time. Each discovery added a piece to the puzzle I didn't know I needed to solve. Finally, I found a birth certificate for a girl named Elise Carter. Born in 1969, the father listed was James R., my grandfather's initials. My heart pounded as I realized Elise could be the child from the journal. I found an address linked to an old phone directory. It was in a small town 2 hours away. The house still existed, now weathered and overgrown, like it had aged, holding secrets. I stood outside, debating whether to knock, but I didn't knock that day. I wasn't ready. What would I say? "Hi, I'm your cousin, and our grandfather lived a double life?" I needed to be sure this was the truth before upending someone else's world. Back home, I kept revisiting the journal, piecing together timelines. I compared dates, letters, and locations, and everything aligned too well to be coincidence. I couldn't deny it any longer. My grandfather had a second family. That night, I dreamed of Elise. In my dream, she opened the door and simply said, "What took you so long?" I woke up knowing what I had to do. It was time to face the truth, and I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the conversation with my mother, her trembling voice, the trembling truths. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by photos and letters I had brought from her house. Everything felt like a puzzle I never knew existed. Early the next morning, I packed my bag and drove to the address written in one of the letters. The house looked like it belonged in a forgotten decade, with chipped paint and overgrown bushes. I stayed in the car for minutes, unsure of what I hoped to find. But something inside told me I needed to know. I finally knocked on the door, my hand slightly shaking. A woman in her 70s opened it. She had a warm but surprised expression. I introduced myself with a cautious tone and mentioned the name I had read in the letters. Her eyes widened, then softened with something like understanding. She invited me in, and I stepped into a living room filled with old photos and the smell of cinnamon. The silence was thick but not uncomfortable. She offered me tea and sat across from me with a picture frame in her hands. It was a photo of my grandfather, the same one I had in my wallet. Her name was Dolores, and she had been in love with my grandfather decades ago. He was supposed to return for her, but he never did. Her voice cracked as she spoke about the day he disappeared. She said he left her a letter. The next morning, I called my mother. She answered with a voice already full of worry, as if she'd been expecting that call. I told her about Dolores, about the house, the photos, the letter. There was silence on the line, long and heavy like a held breath. Then she broke down. She admitted that she had always known about Dolores, but never met her. My grandfather had confessed everything to her shortly before he died. He asked her to keep the truth buried, not out of shame, but to avoid hurting more people. I felt betrayed, but I also understood. My mother had carried a weight that didn't belong to her. She was trying to protect everyone, even if it meant living a lie. And in some strange way, I loved her more for that. Her silence wasn't cold. It was compassionate. That day, I started documenting everything. I opened a new journal and wrote every detail I had learned. Names, letters, locations, feelings. I wanted to make sure that the story of Dolores and my grandfather would not vanish again. I owed them that much. I also began reaching out to relatives. Some were stunned, some denied it, but others cried with me over the phone. Piece by piece, the silence began to crack. Hidden truths have a strange way of healing once they are no longer secrets. I couldn't stop thinking about Dolores' letter. Her words stayed with me like a haunting lullaby. I read it over and over, trying to absorb every emotion she had poured into that page. She wasn't bitter. She was broken and still full of grace. In one paragraph, she wrote about my grandfather's eyes. He had those sad eyes, like he was always apologizing without saying a word. That line tore something open in me. I remembered those eyes. I had seen them in family photos, and now I saw them differently. I visited his grave the next day. For the first time in my life, I didn't just say goodbye. I said, "I forgive you." I whispered it through tears, not for him alone, but for all of us who never got to speak the truth while it mattered. It was a quiet kind of closure. On the way home, I stopped by the house again. I stood outside, watching the windows, imagining her sitting behind one of them decades ago. I imagined her brushing her hair, waiting for someone who'd never really arrive. That house wasn't just wood and bricks. It was memory. That night, I dreamed of her. Dolores stood at the foot of my bed, smiling sadly. She didn't speak, but I felt her gratitude. Maybe it was my subconscious. Maybe as I wrote, I started piecing together the quiet decisions that shaped my family's history, the silences, the looks exchanged but never explained. I saw how generations carried pain without knowing its source. The story of Dolores filled in the blanks. I spoke to my mother again, this time without anger. I asked her what she remembered about Dolores. She was quiet at first. Then she said she used to send letters. Your grandmother burned them all. My stomach dropped. My history had gone up in smoke. I wanted to hate my grandmother, but I couldn't. I imagined her, proud and scared, making choices with the tools she had. Maybe she thought she was protecting us. Maybe she didn't want the shame to pass on. Maybe she simply didn't know how to forgive. One day, I received a call from a woman named Elena. She said she was Dolores' niece. She'd heard I was asking questions. "I think we're cousins," she said. Her voice trembled. Mine did too. The past was opening new doors in the present. We met for coffee. She brought old photographs, some of which had my grandfather as a young man, arm in arm with Dolores. They looked so happy, so real. I felt like I was looking at a life that was supposed to happen. I brought Elena to meet my mother. It was awkward at first, like strangers trying to speak the same language without words. But slowly, things thawed. My mother listened to Elena's stories. She even smiled once. I could tell she was remembering. Things she had buried deep down. Elena gave us a photo of Dolores holding a baby. "That's my brother," she said, but she always carried this picture with another baby one we couldn't identify. My mother stared at it. Her eyes welled up. That's my sister," she whispered, "but she died young." Pieces. of the puzzle were falling into place. Dolores had stayed in touch in her own quiet way. She had kept that baby's memory alive. And suddenly, I understood why that painting of the girl in the attic had always given me chills. It was a portrait of my aunt. The attic wasn't just a room filled with dust and secrets. It had been a shrine, a quiet place of grief and remembrance. I asked my mom why she never mentioned her sister. She said, "I thought forgetting would hurt less, but it never did." It only made things heavier. That night, I went back to the attic. I brought candles. I placed flowers near the portrait. I whispered the names of the women who came before me, Dolores, my aunt, my grandmother, and I cried. In the weeks that followed, Elena and I grew closer. We shared meals, memories, and laughter that felt like it had been waiting decades to be released. She helped me catalog the contents of the attic, treating each item with reverence. We weren't just organizing, we were honoring Dot. My mother slowly began opening up too. One evening, she joined us upstairs. She held a scarf that had belonged to Dolores, running her fingers over the threads like they held stories. She used to braid my hair every morning, she whispered. I forgot how gentle her hands were. We found a box of letters, some unopened, others read so many times they were soft with wear. They were written by Dolores, but never mailed. My mother cried reading them. I held her hand. Sometimes healing comes not with answers, but with the permission to feel again. Elena brought over her son one afternoon. He ran around the garden, chasing butterflies, laughing freely. My mother sat on the porch, watching him. Dolores would have loved this, she said. She always wanted a big family gathered around her. Her eyes sparkled, then TEARED dot. We started planning a small memorial for Dolores. Not a sad affair, but a celebration. After the memorial, a peace settled over the house like the walls themselves had exhaled. I began staying longer, sometimes overnight, just to be near the quiet rhythm of this rediscovered connection. Elena often joined us for tea on Sundays. Our lives had braided together in the gentlest way. My mother started gardening again, planting lilia and roses in Dolores's favorite colors. She hummed as she works, something I hadn't heard in years. The garden bloomed like it was part of the healing too, as if nature had been waiting for this chance to grow with us. One evening, I found my mother placing a photograph on the living room wall. It was the three of us, Elena, my mother, and me standing beneath the oak tree, smiling. "It's not about forgetting," she said. "It's about remembering with love, not pain." I understood her completely. I never imagined that an old attic could hold the key to rewriting our family's story. The secrets it held were heavy, yes, but they were also sacred. They gave us the gift of truth. And with that truth came an unexpected grace, forgiveness, rebirth, and a deeper kind of love. Today, I keep one of Dolores's letters on my knit.